Hey everyone, have I here bring a video on Dragon Ball Z Dokkan Battle. In this video, we're going to be discussing the state of categories, and that's right, it's over 90. So with that, if you're new to my channel, like, subscribe, comment below, do all that good stuff. Let's go ahead and dive right in. And this is something that I've been always interested in since the creation of the category meta, because ever since this came out back in 2017, prior to that, for the previous 2 years of Dokkan's initial creation, it's always been either like the type meta or the class meta, and then ever since 2017 it's just been categories. And it's going to be interesting how far that they're going to go. Are they going to revamp this? And again, in this video we're just going to go over some of the categories and kind of figure out where this is actually going to end up. So as of right now, we have just crossed the 90 category amount and gotten the 91st category in tournament participants. Now this is on the JP version of the game. We don't know if this is the exact translation of it, but we're just going to call it tournament participants. And again, scrolling all the way back to the beginning, the first category that was ever created was the fusion category. Well, it was fusion and Shadow Dragon Saga, right? So these two units were the first two units to have the current category meta, and it was really introduced from the like in a sense a worldwide campaign, right? Worldwide celebration back in August 2017, and then that was Super Saiyan 4 Gogeta, and of course we have the Omega Shenron here that came out on the same day, and they were 150% leads. And back in 2017, 150% leads were absolutely the meta. And on global, it was that much of a meta that global had to wait on the to be released leader skill, right? So that this horrible choice of them providing those units. And yes, we're getting into the neo gods and stuff like that, but kind of it was a big shaft for global back in 2017. But it really continued on, right? It had probably the first 10 categories here. It had the layers of, really good to kind of worthless. And I remember when Peppy Gals came out, you kind of saw that this was going to be more free to play. Of course, World Tournament was just part of the World Tournament there. And it kind of led to probably the strongest ones in the initial group, and that would have been Universal Survivor Saga with Jiren coming out, and STR Jiren just actually recently EZA'd on the JP version game. And then also Realm of Gods, that was interestingly came out, and that actually came out with the SSR UI Goku. So remember, this was when the anime was still going on, and this was introduced October 2017. But this thing didn't actually awaken, and you didn't get the 150% leader skill until later in 2018 here. So again, a very interesting thing what they did with Realm of Gods, but that was a very strong category. And then, of course, along with Patara, that led the category meta for quite some time with LR, 3rd year anniversary, Int, Super Vegito, right? So we can see some of these categories that are like, okay, even in the beginning, there were categories that you're like, oh, I'm not too sure about that, right? Like Resurrected Warriors, even though that was actually a very strong team when it normally came out. Then you have Low Class Warriors. And some of these that just kind of popped out, right? We had Super Saiyan 3 category before Super Saiyans, which is very interesting. Super Saiyans or Super Saiyan 2. And this is definitely one of those categories where like they just forget about it, because ever since this came out, we really haven't had much of a buff. This Bardock recently EZA'd, but look at the amount of units that's on here. It's non-existent. And speaking of something that's being forgotten, where's this guy's EZA, right? This is the last Neo 100 LR, Yellow Coin LR, back in December 2017, that still hasn't gotten its EZA as an LR EZA. Everyone else has, and we're far into 130% LRs as well. So again, very interesting the choices they were making, way back when. And when you start to kind of go down the line here, you saw some of the free-to-play categories. Then you had certain categories that just really dominated. I would say when Pure Saiyans came out as the 130% lead, right, with Evolution Vegeta, right? So we had this unit here that, even though it was at 130 attack, the amount of units that were on this category was just almost unbeatable. And of course, then this kind of reigned supreme at 150% when 170% units started to come out. Even at 150, it was very, very, very strong. So Pure Saiyans lasted years and years as one of the best categories in the game. And I would say it's still one of the best categories in the game with Gaku as the leader. But you had certain units like full power, or certain categories like full power and androids that had its moments. But I would say most villains like movie bosses and androids and some of these, Majin Buu Saga, of course, you had superclass units as well. But those types of teams had so much potential, but they just really decided not to have a lot of extreme class OP units. And most of these categories that are generally extreme class led, just are underwhelming, right? So like Transformation Boost is kind of like one as well. Wicked Bloodline, things of such. So you kind of scroll further down. I'm just kind of going through the timeline here. I'll talk about each of them actually more when I actually go into when they actually started categorizing this to make this a little bit more sense. But yeah, you can just continue to go down here. It's like, wow, they just have so many. A lot of them kind of crossed over, and really way down here, tournament participants being the last one right before Power Wishes, they've kind of slowed down, which I actually am okay with. So I would say when Bond and Parent and Child came out, we really haven't seen much of new categories over that period of time. Remember, Bond and Parent and Child was LRGG, which came out over a year ago, right? Let's see that. What's going on? There we go. Came out in June 2022 on JP version of the game. And when you look at the amount of categories that came out since June 2022, it's only been superheroes, Earthbred Fighters, Power Witches, and tournament participants. So they are slowing down. So really the question is, what are they going to start doing with all these categories? Because it's really unsustainable, because you just have so many and so many. And I've always said now is, if you introduce a new unit and it doesn't have a minimum of 8 categories that it's on, then the impact of that unit is just, not really worth your Dragon Stones. Maybe it's on the current best team, but after, a few cycles of that, it becomes, not very valuable. Unlike some other amazing units like a Kamehameha leader AGL Gohan that's on so many teams there, Super Saiyan Blue Kaioken, stuff like that. It's very, very useful when you have it on many teams. So let's look at how it's actually in-game categorized here. And I think this is very interesting, because when you start looking at the categorizations of these, certain ones are just, it's going to end up just not having that many more. So for example, the sagas here, you have DB Saga, you have Saiyan Saga, Planet Namek, Androids, Majin Buu, etc. Future Saga got the biggest boost of recent, right? And then if you were to like rank these sagas in these categories here, you would say Future Saga is number 1 by far at this point in time, and you can say Shadow Dragon Saga is the last. Because you look at Shadow Dragon Saga, like look at this, it's so sad. Like look at how many units is on Shadow Dragon Saga. It's like almost a waste of a category. Like, why do you even need this one on here? Just sprinkled extreme class and super class units on here. You're more in lines with having just as a full GT saga than Shadow Dragon Saga, which I think in the future they might actually end up doing that. But then you have like Saiyan Saga. It's a saga where I think you can even do a lot more of, but they just ended up choosing, okay, well, we're not just going to introduce a lot of units. So the amount of units on the Saiyan Saga is very similar to the Shadow Dragon Saga, but they can still do a lot more when it comes to it. Add more characters. I was hoping for like a full Z Fighters LR, stuff like that, and just have more relevant units. So just kind of, and this makes me sad because Saiyan Saga is my favorite saga, the OG saga, that they actually did not do its justice. So so that's the saga right here. I don't really see them putting too much more sagas on here. They can do like the full GT saga. They can do like the full Super saga, I guess, something of that nature. And it'll be interesting to see if they are going to group up or even create more, because I think there's a lot of limitation here on the sagas. The next one will be races, right? You have Saiyans, you have Hyper Saiyans and Pure Saiyans, mixed together. You have Earthlings, like this one right here, and then Warriors Raised on Earth. They just really messed that one up, right? Because this is one of these categories where, like, what are they thinking? Like. Actually, there's a lot on here. I just realized there's quite a bit of units that are on the Earthlings category comparable to everyone else. And of course, you have Bulma, you have Mai. Yeah, but you don't really have no OP units to run on the team. This category has to be linked up with another category to be anything relevant. So that's one of these weird categories where it should have just been, Earth Warriors versus Earthlings, unless they were going to create like a OP leader that you can run this team on. So that's absolutely a waste of a category. You have Android. Namekians is another one. They're like, okay, what do we do with Namekians? Because Namekians isn't really all that many characters. But actually, when you start thinking about it, you can actually build a really, really nice team with the Namekians now because of LROP, right? You have LROP here, and then you have to find 5 more other units. Well, it's going to be this and this Piccolo here. You can run this Piccolo, and I wish this was Piccolo fused with Kami instead of just another Piccolo, just like this unit here. But you can run both of these, and then maybe have this one as a floater, etc., etc. So you can run, and then you have Piccolo Jr., but you can't run it on this team. So again, I think they're not that far away from making a really, really nice Namekian team. Like get a better Nail, get a better Kami, and you already have an amazing Piccolo Jr., maybe another Demon King Piccolo, stuff like that. They're not that far away versus like Earthlings. It seems like, they need like an LROP to make it more viable for you to actually run a Earthlings team. But you look at like Goku's family, Vegeta's family, those are very, very good, and they can still build on it. Of course, Goku's family is going to be more robust than Vegeta's family. And then, of course, Peppy Gals was this one that we talked about that's more free to play and more kind of gimmicky than anything else. So I think when it comes to races, there's not too much more they can actually add onto this, right? You have androids, artificial life forms. They can do, kind of like, here's one of the funny thing is they don't have Realm of Gods as like part of this races, but they could just have a gods category, which would be just basically Realm of Gods anyway. So they can't do that. I'm trying to think of anything else they can add with races. I don't really think so off the top of my head, right? Like if you're going to do Ceruleans or stuff like that, it's very limited. You can do maybe a category where it's like everyone except Earthlings. I think that's the only other category I can think of. But yeah, I think races is now being pretty limited on there. Forms is kind of ridiculous, right? Because I mentioned this already. Super Saiyan 3 came out before Super Saiyans or Super Saiyan 2, but now you have Power Beyond Super Saiyan, which just basically takes over Super Saiyan 2 and Super Saiyan 3, right? And then on top of that, Super Saiyan Blue, etc., etc. So these are already invalid if you already have Power Beyond Super Saiyan as a leader skill. So this is kind of what I'm talking about in the future. What are they going to do with some of these that are just very very small categories that aren't really all that useful? I'm trying to think, how many units are on Super Saiyan 2? Like that's not many either. So, oops, gotta go back here. But then you also have Fusion and Patara. That's no longer really viable because of Fused Fighters, because that's the combination of Patara and Fusion together. So see how they're kind of grouping that together. Do they just remove these so it'd be just less categories and less confusion? Because this can cause a ton of different confusion when you're dealing with this. And are they gonna change power absorption and like power absorption and like Fused Fighter, like consists of absorb their powers? Like, that's kind of like a Fused Fighter, right? So I think some of these are maybe even in Fused Fighters. But you have like Transformation, Boost, Transform, stuff like that. Then Kamehameha is one of these forms that's kind of interesting. It's not a power. That, of course, is going to be primarily super class. You do have a few like Cell and Goku Black that do Kamehameha. But ultimately, I think forms, you can add more to it. right? Instant transmission type of thing on there, which actually just Goku and a few other characters sell. So anyway, I just, again, very interesting to see how many forms they can actually add, and then what are they actually going to do and start consolidating this, which they seem like they've already have done it with at least Super Saiyan 2, Super Saiyan 3, Fusion, and Potara, with those 2 additional categories on there. Powers, I think powers, it can be anything. And when you actually look at what's even viable, right? You have Power of Wishes. Actually, this one is the most viable out of all the categories. You have Power of Wishes, Powerful Comeback is a viable category. Even Full Power is viable. Chrome of God's okay. Some of these other ones, like Mastered Evolution, Rapid Growth, they never really got its due. And here's one that's very interesting here. Majin Power. This was a category that was very strange, where it's just the Boos and then Oob, right? I was like, well, what about Majin Vegeta? What about Babidi? What about those individuals on there? Because it's Majin Power, not necessarily just, Majin. So it says consists of possessing the powers of the Majin race. I think they should just remove the race and just said Majin Power, and because that's what the category is. It would be just a much better, option, because I just think this is so limited, and who actually cares? Because when this EZA's here, his leader skill is still going to be primarily focused on building a team with power absorption versus Majin Power. Now you do have the Super Buu on here that can make this unit very good, but this still is not going to be a 200% lead. This is going to be 180 or 170. We actually don't know when this EZA is here. So, and then the final 4 that's on here, you have relationships, which is probably best bang for your buck when it comes to the best leader skills for this category, because you have like joint forces, you have bond of parent and child, you have Bond of Master Disciple that just got a huge boost there as well. And then you have things like Siblings Bond that's going to be very interesting once it gets a 200% lead. So associations, this is probably the weakest. So this is the strongest per grouping. This is probably the weakest of relevant category teams. You have the free-to-play stuff like Ginyu Force, Team Bardock, stuff like that, right? You have like Universe 6, come on. It's just, it did get a huge boost in this in the grouping of EZAs. So, but these all are in combination of Universal Survival Saga. So, you rather run that team than these particular teams here. Now, superheroes and movie heroes, they're still absolutely relevant. So these are the 2 strongest ones out of the group here. But I think everyone else, it's like, World Tournament, what are you going to do there? Even tournament participants, the team in itself isn't all that great, but you have a lot of different categories on here, and I think you only have a few that's really anything good. Like GT Heroes has fallen off since the 7-year anniversary. It does get boosted up with the LR Full Power Super Saiyan 4 Goku, which Global hasn't gotten yet. So I think they might have get a little bit of a boost here, but ultimately I think a lot of these aren't as relevant as it used to be. Characters here, of course you have Earth Red Fighters, is the best out of this category. But yeah, like Defenders of Justice, like what were they thinking when they were building this? Like, I think Jiren's on this, right? Yeah, Jiren's on this one, but it's just a random grouping of individuals, and then you have 170% lead in Videl. And it's like, when's the last time you've put Videl on your team? Like when has that ever has happened since this unit actually came out and Defenders of Justice was there? So that's an absolute throwaway. Survivors can be like that, even storied figures. Maybe this one is the least out of associations. Either associations or characters, man, because I'm looking at this. You have Earthbred Fighters that is relevant. Space Driving Warriors, maybe in some sense. Time Travelers, yes. And that's kind of about it. So yeah, maybe it's association or characters versus associations, one of the two. Then you look at moments. Moments that do have some really, really strong categories like Terrifying Conquerors, like Battle of Wits, Battle of Fate. I'm correcting myself each time I'm looking at this. I'm going, okay, that might be it. Okay, so Moments is the champion, because I just named 3 and they have like 10 on here that's relevant, whereas these, they do have a lot, but they have more relevant here. For example, like superheroes, movie heroes, very strong, and then kind of everything else. Yeah, these 3 groupings is where the over categorized in this game has happened. You have so many categories that are like meh, like Entrusted Will, yeah, who cares? Target Goku's it's an interesting category, but they really haven't done much with it. And then finally collaborations, which would be crossover and Dragon Ball Heroes. The funny thing about crossover is I think they forgot they did a crossover with Xenoverse, because where's the unit I always talk about when I pick them up? Right here. This guy. This guy here awakened in June of 2016. And I think this is the oldest Dokkan Fest awakenable, not Dokkan Fest featured, but let me take that back. Summonable awakened unit in the game that hasn't gotten an EZA. I think this is it. And he was actually kind of relevant because you were actually using him for a world tournament. But do they remember? Hey, you know, we did Xenoverse here, right? You know, it says Xenoverse right here. I don't know. I don't think they remember that. Oops. A long time ago. So anyway, so that's kind of where all these categories comes from. This is actually how they categorize within in game, if you're just kind of wondering, you know, what the color schemes are and stuff like that. So what I'm hoping to see is a consolidation of categories, right? Where, you know, if they introduce a new category, it's going to do what Power Beyond Super Saiyan did with Super Saiyan 2, Super Saiyan 3, and then adding on a bunch of different characters there from there as well. Fuse fighters with Fusion and Patara, etc., etc. And there's just a bunch of these, I won't say worthless, but yeah, kind of worthless categories that we need to remove or just merge them in. And because this will get very complicated when we hit 100 categories, it's just very complicated, very hard to keep track of. And maybe that's what they're going to do in 10-year anniversary, just do a full revamp, especially on the categories here. Now sagas, they'll probably keep the same, races they'll keep the same, but just some of these other ones down here, whether it's associations, characters, and then moments. I think moments they can do without a lot of those on there. So but anyway, I just wanted to make this video here because we did cross over the 90 category, and I know this is a longer video, but I just wanted to discuss all these. And yeah, just tell me what you guys think about the immense amount of categories in the game right now. Where do you guys think it will actually end up? Are they going to consolidate? Are they just going to continue to go like 150, 100, 200 categories and just continue on and on? Just let me know in the comment section below. And if you're new to my channel, like, subscribe, do all that good stuff. Thank you all for watching. Keep on Dokkaning. We'll catch you next time. Later.